I'm sure if you looked up in the dictionary under integrity, you'd see a picture of Norman Gladstone.
Norman was always dressed in a suit, but he'd take his tie off, and he was always prepared to roll up his sleeves.
Honestly, I think there's a few people in the room that probably don't know who Norman is.
A lot of people don't know all the things he's done.
He started actually as a dishwasher. He had his brewmaster's ticket. He worked for Whitbread in the UK.
He's lived on a kibbutz.
He worked for South African breweries.
He's been a restaurateur. He's been in the wine business.
He's not only an importer and a wine agent, he's a philosopher king. He's studying history. He is a man of the world. You never know where he's going to wind up, in the middle of a war somewhere or whatever.
And he was living in the UK working for Whitbread. The Australian government was looking for immigrants, and so he basically filled out a form, and they jumped on a ship in Southampton, and it set sail for Australia, and I think it landed in Fremantle, Adelaide, Melbourne, and then Sydney. You could get off anywhere you wanted, free passage, but you had to work for 2 years. You had to agree to work for 2 years. So he drove a taxi in Sydney for 2 years and worked for the brewery before he came back to Canada.
In 1992, I found myself driving to an interview at rented offices over on Broadway. I was applying for a job with Gladstone and Company Wine Imports. I later found out through Norman that I was going to be his first employee. I thought it was kind of funny at the time. Norman offered me a $250 gift certificate to Friedman's. Norman had this idea that an indication of a person's hard work was by looking at the soles of their shoes to see if they were worn out.
He was the head of the IDSA, and this was going back 30 years ago. You know, if you think things are difficult now with the liquor board, they were really difficult then as well. And he really, as a person that owned his own company prior to joining with International Cellars, he fought it out in the trenches for lots of the big companies.
So the original Harem Girls started with myself, Jan Edgeworth, and Kim Gray. I'm sure there's others that would like to join us, but for right now, we're Norman's Harem.
When he was president of the IDSA years ago, Malcolm Skinner and Rick Carl decided to get a ball team together with the IDSA and have ball games against the LDB once a year. And that's how Jan and I decided to start running the IDSA LDB ball games. And Norman would be out there, he wouldn't play, but he'd be out there cheering everybody on.
He also has a very unique approach to sending out samples, I discovered. The first time that he sent me samples, they arrived with a very chatty memo, which is typical of Norman, witty to the limit. And included in the box with in this memo were pre-authored shelf talkers, just in case I might not have time or inclination to write them for myself.
I think he made a great contribution. He really helped build International Cellars that became one of the fine wine companies in the city.
Adventurous beyond belief. I mean, if you gave the guy 15 minutes, he could meet you at the airport, bag is packed, ready to go, any adventure, anytime, any day, ready to go.
One word that I would say about Norman is he's got class.
You know, he sort of saw the industry at large and just said, look, I mean, what's good for International Cellars or Gladstone and Company is good for the industry and vice versa.
Norman used to take great pride at New Year's time trying to tie up all the high-volume liquor stores for the bubbly tastings. You could find yourself walking into a liquor store on the 31st and seeing Norman in his top hat pouring away. He was quite a crowd pleaser.
The Canadian guys at Second City TV made him famous. When they were younger, they looked so much alike. People used to say, "Are you related to him?"
Well, folks, cheers to Norman Gladstone and all of his years in the beverage alcohol trade.
Cheers.